For Washington Wizards fans and the league at large, the spring of 2017 was peak John Wall. Nothing describes that more than this moment where Wall hit a 3-point game-winning shot during Game 6 of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Boston Celtics. If you can imagine we don't know what's going to happen during the rest of his career, standing there on that table in Washington, you might think that he's well on his way to winning championships like Kobe Bryant or Dwayne Wade. And well, that never happened. He went from this to this. And we have to talk about why in the summer of 2017, the NBA handed out nearly $1 billion to just 4 dudes, one of which was John Wall, and what has happened since then. The 2017 CBA was agreed upon in December 2016, meaning it was mid-season when players found out they were basically eligible for bigger contracts in the summer when the CBA went into effect in July. Why the new contracts? The Kevin Durant rule in the CBA, also known as the designated veteran player rule. This rule makes veteran players eligible for 30 or 35% of the cap for up to 5 years, depending on their service. But a team also needs to own their rookie bird rights, all because when Kevin Durant joined one of the most dominant teams in history, the Golden State Warriors, his offer sheet from Oklahoma City and Golden State were the same at $26.5 million. The new contracts, if it worked perfectly, would keep a star player with the same franchise that drafted or traded for them under their rookie contract well paid and on that team for a decade. Which brings us back to a guy like John Wall, who fit that criteria going into December 2016, and he was still ascending to new heights. People forget this, but at the time, John Wall had made 2 straight All-Star teams and made his 3rd that season for a Wizards team that had fellow recent high draft picks in Bradley Beal and Otto Porter Jr. Wall was at the time considered the 2nd best player in the Eastern Conference behind LeBron James and would make the 3rd team All-NBA team that season. Which, let it be known, the numbers did way more than support that. On the season, Wall averaged a career-high 23 points per game and a career-high 10.7 assists per game, leading his team in minutes and shots while playing 78 games that season. And on defense, he also led the league in steals with a tidy 2 per game. As far as health, he also played more than 70 games the last 3 seasons while averaging more than 17 points and 8 assists for each season in that span. John Wall got really absurd, however, in the biggest moments, the playoffs. Even though his team was a 4th seed in the East, it was weak enough that some considered them the best team behind the LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love Cavs and saw the possibility that the Wizards could make the conference finals. In the playoffs, John Wall had a ridiculous 27 points and 10 assists per game. Even his one weakness, shooting from 3, didn't look so bad as he shot 34% from 3 with nearly 5 attempts per game over a 13-game span. Some of his performances are absolutely ridiculous. Against the Hawks, for example, he had 32 points and 14 assists to open the series. In Game 5, again, he had 14 assists along with 20 points in a win. Then he closed the Hawks out in a Game 6 with 42 points on the road and a blowout victory. Not to mention in the second round against heated rivals in the Boston Celtics, who were the top seed in the East, John Wall carried his team to 7 games by winning every game at home in Washington. He had 4 games with double-digit assists, a 40-point game in Game 2, and a clutch game-winning 3 to tie the series in Game 6. Even in a poor Game 7 performance by shooting, he had 18 points and 11 assists. After doing all this at only 26 years old and being a former number 1 overall pick by the Wizards, they backed up the Brinks truck on July 21st, 2017, and the extension he received put him in line to earn $207 million guaranteed in just 6 seasons. We now have to talk about James Harden, who the previous season won the scoring title and in 2016-2017 made his 5th straight All-Star game. Harden was incredibly durable as well, having played 81 games and 82 the year before. And for his career, he had never played fewer than 70 games in a season. He proceeded to average a ridiculous 29 points, 11 assists, and 8.2 rebounds, making him 2nd, 1st, and then 21st on the season in those statistics respectively. On top of that, his team finished 3rd in the Western Conference, winning 55 games. He was rewarded for the season with a first-team All-NBA selection. Going into the playoffs, James Harden was going to face the Oklahoma City Thunder, whom were newly without Kevin Durant for the first time in a decade. He dominated that opening round matchup with 4 30-point performances and a 40-point game, winning the series in 5 games. However, in the next round, as he went up against the Spurs, he looked a little bit like a shell of himself while playing opposite of Kawhi Leonard. He had 2 sub-15-point performances, which were both huge losses by Houston of over 25 points in Game 2 and Game 6. And we must note, Kawhi Leonard didn't even play Game 6. Some of James Harden moments were absolutely baffling playing as well. I mean, in 2 games, he had more turnovers than made baskets. Now, I have to remind you, the Spurs won 61 games that year and were the clear favorites. So even though Harden didn't do so well, people chalked it up to not having another star. And as a result, he too got paid. On July 8th, he got a supermax extension from Houston GM Daryl Morey, giving him a 6-year, $227 million contract. And next we get to Russell Westbrook, who may have benefited most from the Kevin Durant rule, given that Kevin Durant leaving allowed Westbrook to do the things that we just thought were impossible on the NBA court. And also, a team can only have one player under this sort of supermax contract at a time, so who knows what would have happened if the CBA came out and Kevin Durant was still on the team. I think Kevin Durant would have got that contract instead of Westbrook. But nonetheless, during the 2016-2017 season, Westbrook was asked to do everything as the ultimate stat stuffer was unleashed upon the league, all the way to an MVP award. He led the league in points, was 3rd in assists, and 10th in rebounds, being the only player under 6'7" to appear in the top 10 for rebounds, period. His stat line for the season, by the way, was a triple-double with 31 points, 10 assists, and 10 rebounds a game. Stuff we hadn't seen since Oscar Robinson. The team's success really didn't follow, but how could it when Oklahoma City was shorthanded? Like I said, they just gave up Kevin Durant, and as we know, in the playoffs that year, the Rockets won in 5. But that didn't stop Westbrook from being unstoppable in his own right. We're talking about a guy who took 30 shots per game and was able to average 37 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists, and 2 steals. The Thunder had to believe they could build on everything he did, and Westbrook smartly waited until the Thunder added a little more talent around him in the form of Paul George before signing his own supermax in September of 2017 and getting $233 million guaranteed over 6 seasons. Now, if I've proven to you that all 3 of these players were at the top of their game and at the top of the game back in the summer of 2017, and we know that the NBA can only pay you based on your past performance, how did it all go? If the Supermax was an experiment and these guys were the guinea pigs, then maybe it didn't quite work. John Wall and Russell Westbrook might belong to the worst contracts in NBA history ever. Through no fault of his own, John Wall has suffered multiple injuries, and aside from a good repeat season the following year, he has never been as good or as dominant for the Washington Wizards again. Now he's gotten paid, but he is no longer a member of the Washington Wizards or a starter in the NBA for that matter after suffering a series of knee injuries and an Achilles tendon injury. For the Wizards, they traded him for Russell Westbrook, who Oklahoma City had traded to Houston. Why? Because even though he was healthy and durable, Russell Westbrook is highly inefficient, hard to build around, and a couple of knee injuries may have sapped his athleticism. He never got out of the first round in Oklahoma City without Kevin Durant, and the Thunder were able to turn Westbrook and his teammate Paul George into a lot of picks. And we'll see what happens there. But meanwhile, the Wizards turned him into a number of players. And while Westbrook seems like a poor fit on the Lakers, those exact Lakers players look like a great fit around Bradley Beal as they look to head back to the postseason. Houston may have gotten the best of it all. Harden is neither inefficient nor often injured as a player, and he took the Rockets to the Western Conference Finals with Chris Paul. The Rockets were able to win a lot of games, and even though they never won a championship, he was considered a success for his time there. When he decided to leave, however, he also got it traded to the Brooklyn Nets, landing the Rockets a bunch of picks and kickstarting a rebuild, despite the fact that somehow the Rockets now have John Wall themselves, who they pay not to play. As it stands, Harden has the best chance to finish out his contract as a champion as he plays on the Brooklyn Nets. And of course, his teammate is Kevin Durant, who started this whole mess. He also plays with Kyrie Irving. However, even that isn't a given, as Harden will enter his age 33 season next year with the ability to be a free agent if the Nets fail to win the title this year. As these contracts come to their end, the 2017 offseason should be remembered as the most lucrative in NBA history. But considering how things turned out long term, for teams like the Washington Wizards, the Houston Rockets, and the Oklahoma City Thunder, it may go down as their worst and a total nightmare. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. The video did mention 4 guys. The last one was this guy right here. He got his extension before everyone in June with 5 years and $201 million. He had just won a championship. Oh, and he was so good he signed another one for 4 years and $201 million in August of 2021. So I guess it worked out for one team. Anyway, thank you for sticking all the way through to the end. Here's 2 more videos. You can also subscribe to the channel or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DannyDoSports. Holla at your boy.